All right, everyone. It looks like we're about 2 minutes before we start. While we're waiting, why don't you go ahead in the chat and connect with us a little bit. Introduce yourself. What pronouns do you use? What do you prefer to be called? What organization are you with? And if you feel intrigued, share a cool fact about yourself. I see lots of familiar names and some new names, which is really, really exciting. For context, Cohort, we're using Kaltura, which is a different platform than Zoom. So folks who are not speaking during or presenting during the web sessions won't be granted camera or mic access, but and we ask that you keep your mics muted to prevent any audio issues. And if you're not hearing anything at any point, you can check your audio output in the settings menu and also before you log on. Awesome. Let me know where you're from too. Where are you located? I'm in pretty cold Michigan. Awesome. All right, looks like we're right at 2 o'clock. So welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. If you want to talk up today's session on social media, go ahead and tag the gnome and use the xAPI Cohort hashtag. We're going to give you a prompt to do that a little later on to test Twitter if you're on Twitter. So this is web session 1. Our web sessions are every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Just a reminder, this web session is recorded and we do send our web sessions out weekly so that if you're not able to participate or attend a live session, then you can catch the recording. And I see folks from all over in the chat. It's good to see you. This semester, we've had 477 folks sign up for Cohort, which is really exciting. Today, we're going to do a getting to know you. So I see that folks are very active in the chat. Really great for us to be able to use that chat. So we do ask if you have questions for our presenters, go ahead and use the chat. And sometimes cohorters are in the chat responding before we even get them to the presenter, which really shows the strength of this community and the assets that exist in this room. So go ahead and put any questions that you have there. If you have an answer, go ahead and answer them, and we'll tee up things for speakers that are speaker specific. We'll get into how the cohort works so that you can understand process and logistics and all of those things. And then Megan will present on what xAPI is anyway. And we have some folks that have been in cohort, some for many sessions, semesters, and also some who are newer. So today we'll have Team Alexa, where we have Izzy. Go ahead and wave, Izzy, so folks can see at the bottom. And Helena gonna present. Go ahead and wave, Helena, present and talk about their experience on Team Alexa. We have Team Zoom, which is Miranda and Bryan, to talk about their experience, and then Team Storyline Engagement, which is Matt, who's going to share about his experience. Thank you all for being here with us today. The folks that are behind the scenes today, kind of hosting, producing, and presenting, I'm Jess, and I am the xAPI Cohort host. I also have Aaron and Jamie here with me, who are behind the scenes producing, helping you with tech, helping you navigate this new platform. I know it's different than maybe what we're used to using, but it's a really cool platform, which is very powerful. And then we have Megan here today, who's going to talk a little bit about what xAPI is anyway. All right, remember I told you that we were going to test out your Twitter usage. So we really try to promote Cohort on Twitter, and that is also a way that we can connect the community, right? For folks who might not be able to make the web sessions due to time, it is a back channel of sorts where we send xAPI Cohort updates and reminders. We share out xAPI news and events, and we share the weekly web session recordings there in addition to in our weekly update that we email to you. So right now, I want you to stop and tweet and use the hashtag xAPI Cohort and tag the xAPI gnome and share one thing you're excited to learn, try, make, even observe or witness if you're just planning on lurking this semester, this cohort. Share that out and we'll share it back from the gnome. Some context about what xAPI Cohort is. So the xAPI Cohort is a free, emphasis on free, virtual, right, which was really powerful last year when we all had to move into remote work. We didn't really have any delays or any hiccups with Cohort because we were already doing that. It's vendor neutral, but we do have a vendor community who helps empower Cohort by giving us free access to some of their tools. It's also 12 weeks, and the biggest bulk of learning is learning by doing, right? So it's a project-based team learning experience and community. Our Slack channel, our Slack has over 3,400 people on it, which have varied levels of experience using xAPI. So that community component is really, really important and something that really helps this learning experience be most impactful. How do we do things here? We have weekly web sessions every Thursday here in our Kaltura live room from 2 to 3. They're also recorded and shared out freely, both on Twitter and in our status updates and on our website. And we have project teams. So project teams apply what they learn through their various projects. And today we have 3 project teams represented to kind of talk about how they did that. The way that project teams collaborate is in Slack. So Slack is our workspace that is for teams. It's also for, we have a job channel. It's also for connection by region. So there's lots of ways that you can leverage Slack in the 3,400 folks that are there. And we also use GitHub, and that's a collaborative workspace for teams. It's a repository, right, that can hold some of your files, but it's also a space where you're sending and submitting your updates. It isn't meant to add any difficulty. So if you do have trouble accessing the GitHub, please let us know and we can help you do that. But it does help us streamline updates from teams so that we can share that out at our weekly updates. And then every week we send out a weekly email with updates and the web session recording to your inbox. If there are any questions about how Cohort works or any of this, go ahead and put that in the chat. But Cohort is kind of chunked, right? I'm an instructional designer, and you chunk things. In weeks 1 through 3, that's when we're getting to know what xAPI is, what the power is of xAPI, and we're getting to know each other, right? So as your teams are forming, you might experience some storming in there, but after around week 3 or the first third of Cohort, you kind of get into a pace. You have some norms, where you're meeting, systems about how you're meeting, and you kind of dig into the details, right? So you're starting to think about your projects around a month in, and really spending more time on projects. You're assigning tasks, you're iterating, you're trying new things, you're scoping things out, and that really that helps you get things done on your project teams. And then the last part of Cohort is where you're applying, practicing next steps, really thinking about and reflecting on what's in it for you. And I think Izzy has an awesome story that he can share about his experience and now what he does professionally as a result. And you're able to also demo that, right? And share that out with the community. We have lots of spaces for you to do that, both here on this web session. We have project team demos, but we also have the xAPI party. We also support you in presenting on other platforms. So it really is a huge learning and professional development opportunity for Cohort members. Again, if you have any questions about anything that I've covered thus far, feel free to put that in the chat. So given that flow, we have a schedule for the semester, And this first week, we're really talking about what xAPI is, what the xAPI Learning Cohort is, and helping to answer questions about how this works for you. We have a panel discussion that are going to share out some projects to kind of get you thinking about what's possible and what you can be doing. Next week, we'll hop into how to send data from e-learning tools. And we have Paul Schneider to talk about using a platform or authoring tool that has xAPI capabilities. We'll have Devlin Peck talking about how to use, how you can do some code and use xAPI on authoring tools that require more coding. And then we'll have Leanne kind of talk about using a tool that makes it a little easier with less coding. So you'll see multiple perspectives on how to send data from e-learning tools. Awesome. And then we'll move into like how the nitty gritty, right? Like how to send data from things that are not e-learning, and that'll be Matt Cleaver presenting that out. We'll learn about learning record stores and how those fit into your ecosystems. We'll learn about statements, states, and profiles. And I'm really excited for that session. That's something that's new this semester, learning about state. We'll move into learning analytics broadly and how you should be doing and planning for that. We'll talk about standards at work with the IEEE and what's going on there and what that means. And then we'll wrap up our formal presentations with creating dashboards and visualizations with xAPI data. And then we'll hop into case studies. And that's going to be the practical applications of xAPI with examples of what that looks like in the real world. And then we get into project team demos. So we will, around April 1st, April 8th, be having a call for folks to sign up to present. So you should think about what you could be presenting there. And I want to name now, day one, that during project team demos, your demo doesn't need to be final. It doesn't need to be perfect. It can be a work in progress. And these demonstrations are a great way to get feedback from the community on what you're doing. So I don't want it to feel intimidating. It is a very great place to get feedback from the broader community. All right, with that, I'm gonna invite our speakers to introduce themselves and give a brief overview of the projects that they worked on. So I'll start in order. So Izzy, if you wanna, I'm gonna go in order of the folks on screen. Izzy, if you wanna give a little bit of context about your project or your experience in Cohort.
Yeah, so my name is Izzy, and I don't even know how many cohorts I've been in now. Maybe fifth, sixth, I don't know, something like that. I've done it a couple of times, and I would say that, you know, when I first started out, I sort of I had a specific purpose, right? So I was working for an organization, a charter school at the time, that was looking to implement xAPI, and I was sort of charged with helping to build out our LRS and learn about xAPI and get all that information. And so my manager suggested I join the cohort. And, you know, my very first cohort, I just kind of went into different teams just to kind of see what was going on. I didn't really know. I was trying to get a feel for it. And I think it was only after that very first cohort that I sort of started participating a lot more actively, taking on, actually leading some projects. And, you know, and that's really the great thing about this cohort, that your level of participation is really just completely up to you. So if all you want to do is just look and see what's going on with other projects, that's great. If you want to take a more active role, you know, that's, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to do. It's just up to your own time. So looking forward to this next cohort. You know, I guess the last thing that I will say before I will let the, you know, Helena speak is, you know, I will also say that, you know, Jess mentioned that your experience in the cohort can really change your life. At least for me, it did, right? I started at the beginning just kind of checking out those other projects. I took on some new initiatives, led some projects, and now I actually work at Watershed as a data engineer, which is, you know, Watershed is one of our LRSs that you will hear about, talked about as a part of this cohort throughout. So it's just been a really great experience, and I love learning about xAPI and being involved in this community. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Izzy. Helena, did you want to share a little bit about your experience in cohort and maybe even some of your experience working with Team Alexa?
Yeah, I started, Melissa was one of the people that got me into wanting to understand a little bit more about xAPI, what it was. I had no idea what that was. So I started out working on storyline, articulate storyline, and then eventually working on other teams. And then for like most of the time I spent working with Team Alexa. And it was so funny, we literally started developing this whole, like, okay, we got how to make some type of margarita, what have you, and training on how to make a drink. And I know Bryan is laughing because I remember that whole process. And then moving on into creating a quiz, an xAPI quiz, and then moving into using the tool as I think it was like I had an IT issue or something like that, or it was the dynamics of like where we kind of moved with Alexa, as we moved and understood the program a lot more on the back end, and how we can get the information that we would like to get gradually grew over three different cohorts. So you pretty much get into what you put into in the time. We met every week. We had information on Google Docs. You didn't have to be intimidated by the fact if you didn't know coding. I'm not a developer per se, but I did start learning a lot. So it was really great. And yeah, we use Watershed. Glad that Izzy is finally over there, Watershed. There are many different LRSs out there, but that was really great. I did learn a lot, and I found myself able to get on other projects as a result of that. And people start thinking, oh, wow, you have such great technical skills. And not really. I think I did okay. I just started learning after you keep doing it. You just keep working at it. So yeah, I really, really, really enjoy it. And I definitely look forward, hopefully, to work again in the cohort, because it's really, as an instructional designer, you do begin to realize that you can get a lot more granular information beyond what the learning management, what you typically get pass and fails. You can get a lot of other detailed information that could really help you develop, your next training course.
Awesome. Thank you, Helena. So Izzy and Helena, you offered insight from folks who have been in cohort multiple rounds and how it's kind of changed your career trajectory and given you new skills. And I'm going to pass it over to Miranda. Can you tell us a little bit about you and the project that you've worked on with Cohort?
Thank you, Jess. Hi, my name is Miranda George. I'm a learning experience designer at Infinitude Creative Group in Plano, Texas, which is near Dallas. This is technically my fourth cohort. And the reason why I say technically is because I was a lurker for 2 whole semesters, and I was there for sessions, and then I started watching recordings probably the 3rd weekend, and I was just on the outside and I was paying attention. But then last semester, I'm sorry, that's my dog. Last semester, I decided to be brave and join a team, and I ended up joining Team Zoom. And with Team Zoom, we ended up being able to measure engagement of participants in Zoom calls. And that was very relevant. It wasn't just that I was working on a team doing this really cool thing. It was incredibly relevant for what was happening in the world. So it was very exciting. And I was able to, even though I had, Helena said everything I wanted to say, that, I was afraid if I wasn't a coding maniac, that I wouldn't be able to participate, that I wouldn't be able to contribute. But I ended up being very surprised at how much I was able to help with my experience as a former teacher, experience as a learning designer, with my experience as a public speaker. all public speaking for me happened virtually. I was able to help with use cases. So that was a giant surprise. I was surprised how much I unmuted myself in that call. And it was also a great, Cohort's great because there are so many different players. You don't have to know how to do everything because somebody's going to pick it up for you, or even just you'll be able to see how it works just being in a team. So it was really cool.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Bryan, did you want to share a little bit about your background and what you worked on in Cohort?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just like Izzy. I've done this a few times and I've lost track now. I think we're somewhere at 6 or 7 semesters that I've done Cohort. I originally started actually working with Team Alexa and Izzy and Helena on a few different projects. And then this most recent cohort worked with Miranda and a few others on Team Zoom. And I've done a couple other projects sort of along the way. Want to echo everything that Izzy, Miranda, and Helena have said so far about Cohort and what you can get out of it. I think the cool thing too is that there's a lot of transferable skills no matter what project that you're working on. In my role as an instructional designer, I'm not creating Alexa skills for all of my projects, but there are a lot of important things that I learned through that project that I get to implement elsewhere, that I even got to bring to Team Zoom and some other projects that I've worked on. So if you see a cool project that that you're excited about, regardless of where you are in your sort of xAPI journey, you're going to learn something that you can apply either to your the role that you're doing or your next project, inspire somebody else in the cohort to continue it and take it on in another session. But lots of great learning that gets to happen in this cohort.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryan. And then Matt, you want to share a little bit about your experience with Team Storyline and your background?
Sure. So hi, I'm Matt. I'm an e-learning developer, and I've always been attracted to technology and using it to express my creativity. I recall being creative from a very early age, and sometimes they get me into trouble. But I've always liked, when I first heard about xAPI, I didn't know anything about it, and I was really curious, and it's taken me a long time to actually kind of get up to speed on it. This is actually my 6th cohort, and I've been a lurker most of the time, just because I'm busy and it's hard to pull away from everything to dedicate time to learning something new, but it's been great. I've learned so much, and the participation, it's up to you. So you can either participate or just hang out and listen and watch and just kind of learn passively, or you could be engaged and do something new, and it's fun. On Team Storyline, we started out thinking we're gonna all collaborate and put together one great big training session and have it all report. But it turned out that it was easier for us to each do our own thing and be creative in our own way. And then we recorded each of our own overview of what we did. And then so when it came to presenting our idea, we each had 5 minutes and a pre-recorded video. So a great team and very positive environment. So fun to be here and to be a part of it. And I echo what everyone else said. So good experience. And some of the best things about it are the resources that are available. You can ask questions and get answers. You could try out new software and new learning record stores, new LMSs, things like that. So it's a really rich resources there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So we talked a little bit about the impact that Cohort has had on you personally, shared a little bit about the projects that you've worked on. Can you tell me some of your proudest accomplishments from those projects? So it could be a milestone, it could be the outcome of that project, what you were able to build and develop. And then tell me a little bit about how you got traction on your team. So I see that someone in the chat is doing what we suggest, getting traction by speaking up their project. But what are some of the tips that you have around getting traction on your project? And I'll start with Matt this time and go backwards.
It just took a little bit of time for me to figure out what tools I wanted to use. I actually was my first time using Storyline, and so I started by creating a mock course about healthy habits, eating healthy, and then I used xAPI as the main source of the xAPI statements. It's a very easy to use tool. It's online, so it stores all your statements, and those are easy to integrate into Storyline. One thing that I did was figured it out, and then I took it back to the team, and I gave like a 1-hour session on how to integrate everything and how to make it report. And so, and also, we just bounced ideas off of each other. We met every Tuesday before the cohort session, and we were able to collaborate and plan ahead of time what we were going to do.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Matt. And either Miranda or Bryan, how did you get traction? What were some of the milestones that you're proud of from your accomplishments on Team Zoom?
I think the biggest milestone with any cohort project is the first time that you send an xAPI statement that gets received by the LRS. There's this moment of like joy of I've done it. It's usually the most simple thing, right? It's only a few parts, but like that actual connection of all of it happening is such a cool moment. And then just like Matt said, coming back to the group and being able to share that. I think that's another cool thing that a lot of teams do here is that it's not just, I'm going to go take it, I'm going to go handle it, I'm going to make all these connections, now it's done, I'm going to bring it back to the team. But there is this teaching moment of like, okay, let's make sure that everybody understands this. We're all at a different journey in our xAPI knowledge. So let's make sure that we all get on the same page before we take our next step, which is a really cool thing. And I think that helps with attraction, right? People are definitely more bought in when I understand what's happening with this tool that's getting sent here, that's getting received by the LRS, how I might use that information within the scope of the project that we're putting together. That's definitely a big highlight from a lot of my past projects is making that first statement.
For me, it was being able to explain from beginning to end how this was done. I recall one session where it was just me and the team. I was asking everyone questions and they were answering every single question and giving me a full picture of how this is done, because I echo what Bryan said. It was so cool to see this really happening and us being able to get that data and being able to do something with that data. That started to be a picture in my head. So seeing the reality of what xAPI can do made me think about other projects I want to do with it. So it's really exciting. That's the word.
Awesome, Miranda. And Matt, there was a follow-up question. Did you connect Articulate through an LMS or standalone?
So we used Veracity as both our learning record store and our LMS. So it's a new feature that's in Veracity that you can actually host the course on there. So that's how we used it.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Helena or Izzy, can you tell us a little bit about a milestone that you're proud of from Team Alexa? And then how are you getting traction for folks to join your team?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll just echo kind of what Bryan said, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, you spend so much time just with all these false starts, like, okay, I'm going to make this one little tweak. Is it going to work? I'm going to make this other change. Is it going to work? And so then when you finally get it in there, it's like, oh my God, there's my statement. Finally. But, in sort of that spirit of also sharing back with a group, as sort of both Matt and Bryan mentioned, I also had the opportunity to present with Bryan at DevLearn last year, and we talked about our Alexa project, which was amazing. So just being able to sort of share that project, even though we didn't really go much further than just, this sort of a pilot demo that we built within the cohort, it was still a really cool thing just to kind of see it done, because it's not really, Alexa isn't really a traditional learning platform that you'd consider like learning from. And then as far as like your second question, Jess, I don't know. I think it was just sort of, let's schedule some meetings. figure out when everyone can get together, and then just kind of take it from there. Really just kind of organically out of discussions was where we kind of figured out how things were going to go. I use Google Docs. That's how I sort of assign people tasks and took notes during meetings, so everyone was sort of accountable that way.
Thank you. Helena, did you want to share out your milestone that you're proud of from Team Alexa?
Well, the first statement, obviously, that actually I could see my statement in the LRS. I thought I just like, okay, I'd solved like the answers to the most troubling equations out there. I really was on top of the world because I did one statement. But I think that for me, that was a big milestone, especially not being a developer. Like, wow, I actually did something. You may have to learn a little bit about JSON, but it's not intimidating like you might think. And both Bryan and Izzy were very patient because I had a whole lot of questions because I didn't understand how this worked. Using an non-traditional tool like Alexa for training is something that got my attention because when I first joined the cohort, I saw a team for storyline. That was obviously something I was used to because I'm an instructional designer. So thinking outside the box using Alexa was different. So that's what got my attention. I think some other milestones when we first started, I remember, my Alexa's going off. Sorry, stop, Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. I'm sorry. So it's going off right now. I need to stop saying her name. So that tool we used to talk to or to send statements to the LRS watershed. We started with Zapier. I had never heard of Zapier. I remember we were using that at first. The first couple of cohorts with Alexa, that's what we did. And then Izzy discovered we don't have to use Zapier. We can get rid of the middleman now. We can actually talk. We can go, because we use voice flow. So we can go from voice flow directly into the LRS. So that integration was a big milestone, I think, for that team, because up to that point, we didn't know that. So I'm glad he had made that discovery. So yeah, I see the comments. Yeah, I speak in code, so we won't say that name anymore. But yeah, so that was really a big milestone to learn about how to integrate that tool with the LRS without going through the middleman.
Thank you all for sharing your learning, your reflections. These folks are in our Slack channels. You can continue to connect with them. Really quickly, as a last wrap-up question, and if there are more questions in the chat, feel free to engage in the chat. But what are you working on this semester? What are you excited for? How can you invite people in? And I'll start with Izzy.
Oh boy, I don't have a project yet. I don't know what I'm gonna do. But if you're sort of new to the cohort, I suggest finding a project that sort of is related to your existing work. So if you're doing lots of e-learning courses and you're really comfortable with Storyline or Captivate or Rise, there's probably going to be a project on that. So go ahead and, you've already gotten over that one hurdle of learning the technology. So then the next part is just adding xAPI to it. And it also makes the cohort feel like it's more of a professional development experience rather than just this sort of extra thing that you're doing on the side, if you can sort of connect it to your existing work.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Izzy. Helena, any last thoughts?
I think you should, in terms of just signing up or joining up, what you want to do this semester. I just signed up myself. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it'll probably be something. I'll take a chance on a team that is working on something that I have absolutely no experience with or completely unfamiliar, like I did with the you-know-what. And so, so I think that, to me, that kind of forces you into a territory that's unfamiliar, that you might discover that you actually truly enjoy. And I like to take a little chance. Take a chance on, see if it works for you. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but I'm sure you'll learn something. You'll get something out of it.
Awesome. Thank you. Miranda, are you thinking about?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to be bold and say I'm starting a group. I want to work with others to create an xAPI-enabled bot to help managers and leaders interrupt bias prior to one-on-one meetings and important conversations where bias tends to muck things up, like compensation and promotion. Again, that's my dog. I have faith that I'll be surrounded by the heavies, and in the jazz world, the heavies are the people who know how to improvise. So I'm just going to be faithful and put myself out there. I'm going to spend this next week. Trying to figure out our tools for Cohort to get people in. I've been a lurker. Glad I joined a group, and now it's time to make the next move.
Awesome. Bryan?
Yeah, I don't have anything specific lined up for this cohort. I'm excited to see some of the cool ideas that I've heard so far. I will say, I think a lot of great projects in this cohort have started just from, I wonder if I could do this, or I wonder if I could connect these things. How would these things work? And then you get a lot of people excited about it, and then somebody emerges as a leader, everybody starts to take stuff on, and then it becomes something cool. So I think I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call or in the Slack channel that have those kinds of ideas, and would highly recommend throwing those out there somewhere in a channel on Slack. And I'm sure you'll find some people who are excited about that and are willing to take that on.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. And then Matt, you want to close us out while we transition, and then we'll transition to Megan.
So there's a few ideas. I want to work with Storyline 360. I want to capture like slide duration, interactions that way. But I also want to use Cornerstone LRS, and I also would love to do some work with Slack. Well, those are my ideas.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So there you have it. We've planted some seeds for the semester. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experience. I'm going to pass the mic on over to Megan. And Megan, you can go ahead with your presentation.
All right. So hi, everybody. It's entirely possible that you're here and you're like, yes, this is exciting. What is xAPI? And so this is a session that's for you. You may have figured out by now that xAPI Cohort is full of newbies and experts. And the combination together is pretty powerful. So there's something for everyone. So X stands for experience. Its grown-up name is the Experience API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. If programming's not your thing, don't freak out. What we're effectively doing is saying that the xAPI is a specification for sending, storing, and retrieving activity about learning and performance experiences. Okay, and in the emails that we send out, if you are registered for xAPI Cohort, which you can do at xapicohort.com, you will get weekly emails, and we have a couple of videos in there to kind of use some of my favorite metaphors for what xAPI is. But if you are familiar with scorm is how your e-learning talks to your LMS. It only works for e-learning or things that you can trick your LMS into thinking it's e-learning. It only works inside an LMS when you're all connected to the internet. And it only keeps track of these, well, there's about 20 things, but about 5 things that instructional designers care about. It is a very short, shallow vocabulary of things that we can talk about. And we get scorm in these nice, neat little packages, right? We send off a zip file. And if you're like me, if you're an instructional designer, you can send off a zip file, give it to the LMS administrator, and walk away and go do your next project. Because that LMS administrator already knows every single bit of data they can get out of that course. right? Not much. Time, score, location, status, answers. xAPI, in contrast, is like a grammar. And with a grammar, I can say anything I want to as long as I follow the grammar. And we use the grammar so that we can have a reliable way to reach in and get data back out, and to run reports and visualizations and fire off business actions and a result as a result. Emily says, if you aren't getting some of that scorm data, will you get that in your LRS on top of what you build in xAPI? So if you're not able to get things like answers in your scorm LMS, maybe because you're using an older version of scorm, or that data is just not being surfaced to you nicely to report. xAPI, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, needs a special database called a learning record store to be able to store and retrieve all of this really interesting data. And I think of it like the Lego store. Everything in that Lego store works with all the other pieces in that Lego store, because they all agree to follow the same grammar, the same bumps and grooves and shapes, so that all those pieces work together, as opposed to, right, sometimes you buy building kits for kids or for adults, right, and they are awesome, they're beautiful, but they don't connect to anything else. Lego connects to all sorts of other things. Okay? So when we're talking about xAPI, we're talking about some new vocabulary. Right? So we have a learning record provider. It is, excuse me, I've been talking all day, I'm losing my voice here, right? A learning record provider sends the data. In an e-learning context, it's the e-learning course. It's sending data, right? In an old-fashioned e-learning context, it's sending scorm data, right? But think about it, right? xAPI, right? Think about the number of times somebody in your organization says, well, can I get information from that PDF? How do I know they watched the video? Can I get the results of a survey? Right? All these things that we wish we could get data from. We were talking about, right, trucks, right? Can I get data from trucks fed into my learning ecosystem, so I know if I teach people to drive a truck, are they then doing that safely? And we have content, and we have xAPI activity statements. So this, right, actor, verb, object, result, context is grammar. This sentence isn't called an activity statement. And a profile defines how we're using the different parts of that sentence. Think of a profile like the dictionary for a different language, right? So I studied French in high school, and I had one of those handy dictionaries, right? Translation dictionary. Okay. I'm going to drip this content in to my beaker, right? Drip, 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 activity statement, activity statement, activity statement, activity statement. I need to catch that with something, and the special database catcher for xAPI is a learning record store. So I've had people say, hey, can I implement xAPI without having to get a learning record store? And the answer is absolutely not, because if this guy doesn't have a beaker, he is dripping out data, it's falling all over the floor. He can't scoop it back up, he can't use it, and he makes a gigantic mess and a big waste of time. Okay? So you need a learning record store to be able to catch the data that you're sending. Okay? It is not the same as a learning management system. Okay? And you have some other data in there, right, in that, that you can put into your learning record store. Now, the interesting thing is, right, we focused a lot on this drip, 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 statement, 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 right? This guy can also take this cheap little pipette he has, stick that into the beaker and go, right, and suck data out to be able to use it. So if you ever wanted to be able to get data into a storyline course, right, or that based on something they did in a different learning experience, or whether or not they braked that truck properly, right? All of that, right, is possible with xAPI. That's not possible with scorm. Right? And so J-Rock kind of like prerequisite stuff, but I can get my LMS to do prerequisites on a course. But if I want to know how people answered question number 4 in course A, or whether or not they told me that they wanted the audio turned off, or that they worked for a particular team, and I want to use that information in a different learning experience, I can go to that level, right? So it kind of takes exactly which avatar they choose, right? There's all sorts of stuff I can do here. In fact, I can do a lot. Once I have this much data, I can do a lot of things, right? But I need to tell you, right? All of these things can be done without xAPI, right? Dale's spot on, right? All of these things can be done without xAPI. xAPI is not magic because of the technology. It's actually based on pretty much straight up old boring web technology, right? The power of xAPI is in the agreement of an entire industry, just like we did with SCORM, to speak the same language. So you can buy beautiful black box systems that do amazing things, but they don't talk to anything else, right? So in 2019, the eLearning Guild and I did a state of xAPI adoption survey, and we looked at what is effectively a pretty healthy technology adoption curve. This doing xAPI experiments, that's where you are right now, right? Or maybe you're coming from this big, tall red bar of 46% of people interested but not using xAPI. What this means is that you are here in a phenomenally interesting time to be working in this space, and it is really, really exciting. There's a lot of things going on. The number one thing that adopters do that non-adopters don't is they start learning through experimentation, which is exactly what you're doing here. As you embark on your projects, you've got a couple things that you'll need to do. One is you will need to send data. There are roughly 5 ways to send data. You probably already have a tool that will send some level of data, right? Or you can write some custom code. There's all sorts of things that you can do here. But keep in mind, xAPI doesn't do the thing. xAPI is how we talk about what got done, right? It doesn't send emails. It gives you the data that you'll need to know who to send an email to, right? Your authoring tools, and I have to say, right, I'm about to show you some product names and product lists. These are incomplete and always, because they are always growing. Right? And so the question is, can you go back to how we'll send data? I'm actually on a really, really, really tight time frame. So take screenshots, folks, or check out the recording in Slack. And I can put these into the cohort Slack too. Same thing. I'm going to go really, really fast. Take fast screenshots. And I'll also put these in the cohort Slack. There are lots of tools that send xAPI data. Some of them send great data. Some of them send basically SCORM dressed up as xAPI. Okay. A couple of you were talking about how do I use an LMS and an xAPI. You can, right, with what we call hybrid publish to both xAPI and SCORM, so you can make your LMS happy and your learning record store, your LRS. I want you to also think outside of the e-learning course. Right? If e-learning is where a lot of people start, okay? But if all we do is soup up e-learning, then we are missing the point, right? We're missing the point. There are learning record stores that you can use, many of whom provide free samples for Cohort, and same thing with some of the tools here provide free samples for Cohort. Okay? There are some LMSs that have it in. There are some LMSs that do kind of some xAPI support, but not fully what you would expect. And then there's some LMSs that actually send data. They're not the learning record store itself, right? So that's another piece. Okay. So your next, right? Step 1, send the data. Step 2, catch the data in a learning record store. Step 3, do something with it, right? Which is where most people are going to take this after cohort. Jess, I am going to turn this back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. I think you have a couple minutes if you wanted to answer any questions that might have come up. I'm not seeing any right now.
No, I think.
All right.
People have been asking as we go. So let's do this, and then Jess, I can come back if we do the legal stuff.
Yep. All right. So, and we'll send out that presentation in the weekly update, and Megan will share it in Slack. So you'll have access to all of those resources. So the next thing that we want to talk about today is how you participate in cohort, right? So we talked a lot about collaborating with teams, and sometimes you build things, right? Like that last step was do something with the data, build something, right? And what does it mean when you build something in a collaborative space? So the license, all of our teams, unless it's stated otherwise. So we do have some teams that are more private and are working with they represent their place of employment, and that is we have a different working relationship there. But for most teams, we're operating under the Apache 2.0 license, which allows for collaborative development. And what that means is the software that's developed is not, it is as it's developed, right? There's no guarantee, no warranty, and you can, I'll put the link right now in chat so that you can review that. And Megan, did I miss anything about Apache that you want to add about the license?
Yeah, actually, if I just, can I expound a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. 3 things that are super important for us to know in cohort, right? This is vendor neutral. You should not expect to be harassed by anybody trying to sell something. That also means you may not harass other people trying to sell something to them. We try to make this as open source and free to everybody without making this a commercial place. And it's really, really important to us that we do that and carry forward the spirit with which the original cohorts were created. However, note that this is vendor supported, and there are a number of vendors who have provided free or extended access to their tools to make this work for you and everybody else learning here, and we absolutely do appreciate that. Number 2, and we're getting into the Apache stuff here, right? Your work is public, right? Do not work on your super secret stuff that your company has, right? That your company secrets, right? Don't do that in cohort. What that also means is that your work may be copied and pasted by somebody as a starting point for their own project later on. That's totally fine. This is free and open, and people are, and which also means that you may borrow work that's been done in prior cohorts and start moving forward from that. That happens a lot, right? It's a great way to get a head start. All of that is possible. It's why we use the GitHub. With the Apache 2.0 license, what it means is you may not sue each other for the bad ideas you give each other. So if you are working on a team, somebody contributes a line of code, you take that off and go do something, and it turns out to be a bad line of code, you may not sue them for that. So my goal is to not have to bring lawyers into cohort. Be good to each other.
Thanks, Megan. Given that is our license, everything that's created here, there are some different ways to participate. So the first way to participate is in project mode. So that could be folks today, I saw our chat buzzing with project ideas. I heard from our panelists that there are lots of ideas. It's the I have an idea and I want to work on. What does that look like? That means you can go into Slack, set up a Slack channel. And you can post a description of your idea in the main channel to invite people over to your team. You can also leverage these weekly web sessions to promote your team and what you're working on. There's also the observer mode, which you heard from our panelists today. A lot of them spent multiple cohorts observing a lot of different projects. That's perfectly fine, and that is an opportunity to learn. You can start by checking out the Slack team channels, and I'm going to show you a screen capture of how to do that. If you need further assistance in accessing the Slack team channels, please reach out to me directly, or Jamie directly, or Aaron directly, or anyone. Like, we can help you find those team channels, and then see what looks good to you, what's interesting to you, and you can join in. You can contribute ideas, you can attend meetings, you can do some of the work, but just joining the Slack channel doesn't commit you to anything. So you can join as many teams as you like, and it doesn't commit you to any work until you actually collaborate with your team and get assigned things. And then we might have you just attending the web sessions to learn, and you just want to learn more about xAPI, and that's also perfectly fine. So what we want to iterate here is you can participate at any level that you want when you're in Cohort. It's extremely flexible. It's on your schedule. So even if you can't come to the web sessions, you can review the recording later. This is for you. It's designed for you. So where does Cohort happen? And there are lots of places that Cohort is happening. Right here in Kaltura on our New Row live room. And that's where we have our weekly web sessions. As you can see today, we had over 127 folks here. And that's a great place for you to get meet folks directly. You can be engaging in the chat. It's also a place for you to hear the web sessions live with the presenters, which means that you can connect with the presenters. And then you can watch them later on. Slack is where we see team and cohort conversations happening. So project teams will plan their meetings there. They might have polls there. They might store their, send their notes there. And it's public access, so you can see anything that's happening in any team. Then we have GitHub, and GitHub we've been using for the last, I think it's been 3 or 4 cohorts now. And GitHub it connects to the back end of our website. So you have a team page, and you submit your weekly updates each week. And those updates automatically go to our team page, so that we can have your updates on command during our web session meetings. That helps streamline our web session. So that's really helpful there. But also it's a collaborative space where you can have a file repository for your team. And that came from direct feedback from our teams asking for a repository. And then also there's a variety of free tools and resources that are offered around xAPI from vendors. And we'll be sending out a list of those tools next week. So be on the lookout for that. So I wanted to walk you through very quickly how to look at different teams. So when you go into Slack, you can look for teams, and they have the hashtag, the # team, and then you'll see the name of the team. If you click on it for more information, it will show the purpose, which is the description, right? So you could see if you're interested in that team. You could see who created it. You could see what members are there. And that just tells you more about the team. So you can access that on Slack. The way that then we also have a main channel. And the main channel is where a lot of information about cohort-wide conversations are happening. And then we have things that start with discuss. And those are conversations, they're not projects. Those are topics and technologies, things that you can discuss with cohort broadly. Cohort-wide conversations are main. Resources is where we post the weekly web sessions and other resources that are accessible. And then social is just for fun socializing. Cohort project teams all start with team. And so that's really important as you're setting up Slack channels, because that's how folks are going to find you, is through the word team. And they are topical teams, technology teams, company teams. It really just depends on what your project team is, the purpose of your project team. And then there are the team spaces on GitHub, and it is a file repository. It's also for me and Cohort when we're doing our updates. And it's for the world, right? Like this is a place where folks can see what Cohort teams are working on and see the updates. And you can see that online at xapicohort.com/teams. Awesome, Don. So as we wrap up this first web session, we want you to know that right now, you might not know anything about xAPI, and that's perfectly fine. Or you might have a ton of experience and know a ton about xAPI, and that's fine too. You might not know anything about coding, or you might know a lot about coding. You might be an expert developer who's looking for a great project to contribute to. All of these things are okay, and we welcome you. You are valued here in this space, and we want to see you succeed and thrive in Cohort. You might not have any idea for a team right now. So there were folks sharing out teams that they want to work on. So they obviously have an idea for a team, and that's awesome. And you might not have folks that want to be on your team yet, and that's also perfectly fine. You can choose not to join a team at all. You can choose to join all of the Slack channels and not work on a team. You can just watch the recorded web sessions. You can start a project and not finish with it. You can join a project team many weeks into the work. Megan likes to say it's never too late for Cohort. And you can just be on the mailing list just in case. All of these things are okay. Your level of engagement in Cohort is up to you. It's just not okay to try and sell your stuff, to create an unwelcoming, toxic environment, to work out loud on your company's proprietary projects. That we don't want to do that here, or try to sue your teammates for bad ideas. Remember that Apache 2.0 license. So that's kind of our first web session. If there are other, the list of teams stale, most of the teams aren't formed yet, but there are some from last semester is in Slack. So yep, we're here every week at 2 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we have how to send data from e-learning tools with Paul Schneider, Devlin Peck, and Leanne G. Remember, we talked about that xAPI party, which is at the end of the semester. It's called the party, but it's a learning experience. It's a conference. So you can learn more about the party online. And then if you have any questions, feel free to email our help desk or message me in Slack. Thank you for being here today. We're excited to see what you accomplish this cohort. Now get out there and go make great stuff.